Hi everybody. This brief audio will provide an overview of what we would have discussed in class tonight, as well as what we can anticipate to be discussing next week. So I created a list then here, and I'll be publishing this to Blackboard, of some of the things that we should be aware of going forward regarding the syllabus and the course content, and then of course the projects. So we'll discuss more of these things in the future, but at this point I think it's important to know, for example, that the PowerPoints that I have listed in Blackboard are supplemental. You don't have to review those, but it would help to round out your understanding of some of the project management concepts that we'll be discussing during the next 7 weeks. You won't be quizzed or tested on them. Also, I moved out the due date for the interview with the manager, the project manager, until week 3, end of week 3, which is November 13th. So by next week you should have someone selected at the very least. I know some of us are already done with the interview, but when you're done with the interview, please submit it to Blackboard. Now, in terms of asking questions of your manager, and it wouldn't have to be a project manager, it could just be a supervisor or someone who works in a decision-making position. Any manager is fine. You might ask how they would describe their management style, how long they've been a project manager, how has maybe their management style changed over time, maybe what have they learned? When was the last time they had to deal with underperforming project team members? What approach might they take when team members make mistakes? That's really an important question. So you can come up with your own questions, but here are some possibilities. And again, you should be asking at least 5 questions to make it worth your while and that of your interviewee. Case studies will be discussed in groups, and the discussion results will be shared with the class. So every week, as it mentions in Blackboard, we'll be doing case studies. We didn't get to obviously this week, but we'll pick the one we missed this week up next week. There was a brief quiz scheduled for week 1. I've waived that, so that is no longer a requirement. We will have a brief, it's like a 5-question quiz next week, and most of the weeks going forward. Now, in terms of the projects, there are 2. Initially, I was going to have presentations for individual projects and for team projects, but I've since decided that the individual projects, which I'll be discussing in a minute, will only involve just a PowerPoint presentation with the components I'll be discussing in the weeks ahead. So more about that in a few minutes. The team project should consist of approximately 3 to 4 members. So next week, in week 2, we'll be forming those groups, those teams. Now, in terms of earning the points for the team project, there are 2 principal deliverables here. One is a PowerPoint presentation, which will include the components that we'll be discussing throughout the term. Second will be a presentation. So the whole team will present out to the class, and you'll be allowed roughly 12 to 20 minutes. We'll see how much time is needed, but you'll certainly have that amount of time if it's needed. And then at the end of each presentation, I ask that the students ask questions about lessons learned and what they might have done differently, and a variety of things that will come up while the presentations are being made. So these presentations will be made during week 7 and 8. So I'd like to get started during week 7 and then before the final exam. In week 8, we'll do the rest of the presentations. In terms of the individual projects, these are going to be smaller in scale, of course, since we only have one person doing each project. Rather simple, and I won't be requiring quite as much in terms of content and comprehensiveness for the individual project. So even though they're both worth 40 points, the individual and the team project, because they're handled individually for the individual projects, I'm not going to require as much, as I say, as much content. We'll talk about that in the weeks ahead. So no presentation now is required for the individual project. Any other questions that come up regarding the syllabus or what's in Blackboard, please let me know. And then of course I have a little checklist here, which I'll get to in a minute. But for next week, it's anticipated we're going to be touching upon the main topics of chapters 1, 3, and 4, and then we'll hopefully be taking a deeper dive into chapters 5 and 6. As I said earlier, we'll complete 2 case studies next week, begin to discuss some of the project tools we'll be using. As I said, we'll be forming the project teams, and then the team members should be discussing the projects they want to do, and I've already provided some suggestions for that, some ideas, but it can be something rather simple, and we'll hopefully get those selected next week, and I'll help you with that, as well as with the individual projects. So we really want to get that settled as soon as we can, and week 2 is a good week for that. And then this will be like a 5-question short quiz. So in terms of what to do between now and next week to prepare for class, I would say, of course, complete the reading assignments found in Blackboard. Review the 2 case studies found in the week 1 and week 2 folders, because we'll be discussing those in groups, those cases. Have your interviewee or the project manager selected. So your project manager or supervisor, or whoever you select, should be picked by next week. So between now and next week, and I'm doing this the evening of our week 1 class, so I would suggest between now and next week having your manager selected. Review the core competencies in Blackboard. I would do that every week, just to kind of give us an idea of what our objectives are for the week. And then, as I said, we'll try to just think of some simple projects, organizing a neighborhood cleanup, a fundraising event, some kind of project that you might use for your individual project or for your group project. If you have any questions on this presentation or on anything we've discussed so far in the class, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we will see you next week.